The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the busy streets of downtown Los Angeles. Film crews, a common sight in this part of the city, were packing up equipment after a long day of shooting. Among them, a man in a simple black t-shirt and jeans stood quietly observing the organized chaos, his longish dark hair occasionally catching the breeze. Despite his casual appearance, there was something compelling about his presence, a calm centeredness that seemed at odds with the frantic energy surrounding him. Marco Alvarez wiped his brow with the back of his hand as he finished loading the last of the heavy equipment cases into the production truck. At 26, he was the newest crew member on the set, having joined the production team just 3 months ago. The job was a foot in the door to the film industry he'd dreamed of being part of since childhood. The hours were brutal, the pay modest, but Marco took on every task with unwavering determination. "That's a wrap for today, people," called out the assistant director. "Call time tomorrow is 5 a.m. sharp." A collective groan rose from the exhausted crew. They had been shooting for 14 hours straight, and tomorrow would be another grueling day. Most began dispersing quickly, eager to get home for a few precious hours of rest before returning. Marco, however, didn't move toward his car. Instead, he approached the production assistant who was checking off equipment. "Hey, Sarah, I was wondering if there's any chance I could pick up an extra shift tonight? Maybe help with the overnight equipment maintenance or something?" he asked, his voice betraying his fatigue despite his eager expression. Sarah looked up from her clipboard, surprise evident on her face. "Marco, you've been here since 4 a.m. That's crazy. Don't you need to rest?" Marco shifted uncomfortably. "I could use the extra hours, that's all." The man in the black t-shirt, who had been speaking with the director nearby, paused in his conversation. Though he didn't turn to look directly at Marco, something in the young man's tone had caught his attention. "Sorry, Marco," Sarah replied. "Nothing tonight. Go home and get some sleep." Marco nodded, disappointment visible in the slump of his shoulders. He walked slowly toward the craft services table, where the crew was making last grabs at whatever food remained before it was packed away. He hesitated, then approached the catering manager. "Hey, Jim," Marco said quietly. "I was wondering if there might be any leftovers you're going to toss out. I could take some home if it's just going to waste." Jim looked up, a flicker of understanding crossing his features. "Sure, kid. Let me see what we've got." He began gathering some sandwiches and fruit into a container. "This enough?" "That's perfect. Thanks," Marco said, clearly relieved. "I really appreciate it." As Marco took the container and turned to leave, he didn't notice the man in the black t-shirt watching him intently. Nor did he realize that this observer was Keanu Reeves, the lead actor in the film they were shooting. Keanu had been working with this crew for weeks now, and he made a point of learning everyone's names and something about their stories. Marco was relatively new, and there was something about the young man's quiet determination that had caught Keanu's attention from the start. After a brief conversation with the director, Keanu discreetly followed Marco at a distance. It wasn't something he would normally do, but an instinct told him there was more to Marco's story than met the eye. Something in the young man's request for food had triggered a concern that Keanu couldn't ignore. Marco walked several blocks to the public parking structure where crew members who couldn't afford the closer parking options left their vehicles. As Keanu maintained a respectful distance, he observed Marco approach not a car, but a faded blue pickup truck that had seen better days. The young man placed his food container carefully on the passenger seat, then climbed in and sat there for a moment, seemingly gathering his energy before starting the engine. Keanu waited until Marco pulled out of the garage, then returned to where his driver was waiting. "Mike, could you follow that blue pickup?" "The old Chevy, but keep a good distance back. I don't want him to notice." Mike, long accustomed to Keanu's occasional unusual requests, simply nodded and maneuvered their vehicle into traffic a few cars behind Marco's truck. They followed Marco through the city, eventually entering a neighborhood that had clearly seen better days. Buildings with peeling paint and security bars on windows lined streets where small groups of people gathered on corners despite the falling darkness. Marco finally pulled up in front of a small apartment building with a faded sign announcing weekly rates. He grabbed the food container and his backpack before locking the truck carefully and heading inside. Keanu instructed his driver to park across the street. "I won't be long," he said, stepping out of the car. He crossed the street and entered the building, noting the flickering fluorescent lights in the small lobby and the faint smell of mildew. An older woman sat behind a desk, eyeing him suspiciously as he entered. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting the opposite. "I'm looking for one of my colleagues," Keanu said politely. "He just came in. Young guy, dark hair, carrying a food container." The woman's expression softened slightly. "Marco? He's in 3B. Up the stairs, down the hall on the right. Good kid, that one. Always pays on time, never causes trouble." She paused, studying Keanu more carefully. "Say, don't I know you from somewhere?" "I just have one of those faces," Keanu replied with a small smile before heading toward the stairs. The hallway on the third floor was dimly lit, with worn carpet that had once been blue but was now a nondescript gray. Keanu found 3B and hesitated. What exactly was he doing here? Following an employee home seemed invasive, but something had compelled him to make sure Marco was all right. Before he could knock, he heard voices from inside. A man's voice he recognized as Marco's, and then a higher-pitched response, followed by childish laughter. Curious, he knocked gently on the door. The voices inside immediately hushed. After a moment, footsteps approached, and the door opened slightly, revealing Marco's surprised face. "Mr. Reeves?" Marco's eyes widened in shock. "Is everything okay? Did something happen on set?" "Everything's fine," Keanu assured him. "I just wanted to check in. I noticed you've been putting in a lot of hours and then asking for more. I wanted to make sure you were doing all right." Marco stood frozen for a moment, clearly struggling to process why the star of the film would be standing outside his apartment door. Before he could respond, a small voice called from inside the apartment. "Poppy, who is it?" Marco glanced back over his shoulder, then at Keanu again. After a moment's hesitation, he opened the door wider. "Would you like to come in, sir? It's not much, but I'd be honored," Keanu replied sincerely. The apartment was small, a single room with a kitchenette in one corner and a door that presumably led to a bathroom. Despite the cramped quarters and worn furniture, the space was meticulously clean. Drawings were taped to the walls, adding bright splashes of color to the otherwise drab room. In the center of the room, sitting on a threadbare couch, was a young girl who appeared to be about 7 years old. Her dark hair was pulled back in twin braids, and her bright eyes watched Keanu with undisguised curiosity. Next to her sat an older woman, perhaps in her 60s, who looked up with surprise. "Mama, this is Mr. Reeves. He's the actor in the film I'm working on," Marco explained in Spanish before switching back to English. "Mr. Reeves, this is my mother, Elena, and my daughter, Lucia." Keanu smiled warmly. "It's very nice to meet you both." Lucia's eyes grew wide. "You're in movies, like a superhero?" Keanu chuckled, kneeling down to be at eye level with the child. "Sometimes. But I'm just a regular person, like your dad." Elena stood up, clearly flustered by the unexpected guest. "Please, sit down. Can I offer you something to drink? We have water, or I can make coffee." "Water would be wonderful, thank you," Keanu replied, taking a seat in the single chair across from the couch. As Elena moved to the kitchenette, he noticed that she walked with a pronounced limp. Marco was still standing by the door, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Reeves, I don't understand why you're here." Keanu considered his response carefully. "I noticed you asking for extra shifts and then for leftover food. I was concerned that maybe you were struggling with something, and I wanted to see if there was any way I could help." Marco's expression tightened. "We're fine," he said quickly. "I appreciate your concern, but we don't need charity." Lucia, oblivious to the tension, had moved to stand next to Keanu. "Do you want to see my drawings?" she asked, already pulling a stack of papers from under the couch. "Lucia," Marco began, but Keanu smiled. "I would love to see your drawings," he told the girl sincerely. As Lucia proudly displayed her artwork, mostly colorful depictions of animals and what appeared to be superheroes, Elena returned with a glass of water for Keanu and sat back down. "Your daughter is very talented," Keanu said to Marco, who had finally taken a seat on the edge of the couch next to his mother. "She gets it from her mother," Marco replied softly, a flash of something, grief perhaps, crossing his features. Elena placed a gentle hand on her son's arm before turning to Keanu. My son is very proud. He doesn't like to talk about our difficulties. But since you have come all this way, Marco works so hard to take care of us since my daughter-in-law passed away last year. Cancer, she explained quietly. I moved in to help with Lucia, but then my arthritis got worse, and now I can't work much. Marco is supporting all of us. Mama, please, Marco said, discomfort evident in his voice. It's okay, Keanu assured him. Everyone goes through hard times. There's no shame in that. Lucia, who had returned to her seat with her drawings, looked up at Keanu. Papi works all the time. Sometimes he doesn't eat so me and Abuela can have food. Marco closed his eyes briefly, the truth of his child's innocent words clearly paining him. Keanu felt something catch in his throat. The reality of Marco's situation was becoming clear. A young father, recently widowed, working himself to exhaustion to support his daughter and injured mother, living in a single room, going hungry himself to make sure his family ate. Marco, Keanu said gently, I admire what you're doing for your family. That kind of dedication is rare. Marco looked up, surprise evident in his expression. He had clearly expected judgment, not admiration. But, Keanu continued, I've learned over the years that sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is accept help when it's offered. Not for yourself, but for those who depend on you. Elena nodded in agreement, patting her son's hand. I don't want special treatment at work, Marco said firmly. I want to earn my position, not get it because someone felt sorry for me. That's not what I'm suggesting, Keanu replied. Your work speaks for itself. Everyone on set has commented on your dedication and skills, but there might be other ways I could help that wouldn't interfere with your professional growth. For a moment, no one spoke. Lucia, sensing the seriousness of the conversation, had gone quiet, carefully stacking her drawings. Finally, Marco spoke. Why would you want to help us? You don't even know us. Keanu considered the question thoughtfully. Because someone once helped me when I needed it, and because part of what gives life meaning is connecting with others, sharing what we have, whether that's resources, knowledge, or simply time and attention. As he spoke, Keanu felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the echo of his own past struggles, the losses he had endured, and the kindness of strangers that had sometimes made all the difference. Looking at Marco's family, he saw reflections of universal human experiences: love, loss, struggle, and resilience. Elena had risen again and was preparing the food Marco had brought home, dividing it meticulously into 3 equal portions on mismatched plates. You'll stay for dinner, Mr. Reeves, she asked, the invitation offered with simple dignity despite their circumstances. The lump in Keanu's throat grew. Here was a family with barely enough for themselves, yet they were offering to share what little they had with him, a stranger who had appeared unexpectedly at their door. That's very kind, he said, his voice slightly rough with emotion. But I don't want to take your food. In fact, I was about to suggest that we all go out for dinner. My treat. Consider it a thank you to Marco for his hard work on set. Lucia immediately perked up. Can we, Papi, please? Marco hesitated, pride warring with the desire to give his daughter a rare treat. It would be my honor, Keanu added quietly. After a moment, Marco nodded, a small smile finally breaking through his serious demeanor. That would be nice. Thank you. As they prepared to leave, Keanu made a quick call, arranging for a suitable restaurant nearby that would offer privacy and comfort without being intimidatingly fancy. Within an hour, they were seated in a private room at a family-owned Italian restaurant, where Lucia excitedly ordered spaghetti and meatballs, and Elena relaxed enough to share stories of Marco as a child. Throughout the meal, Keanu observed the small family, the protective way Marco watched over his daughter and mother, the gentle teasing between Elena and her son, Lucia's bright curiosity and resilience despite the hardships she had faced at such a young age. In their interactions, he saw strength, love, and dignity maintained in the face of considerable challenges. By the time dessert arrived, a chocolate cake that made Lucia's eyes widen with delight, Keanu had made up his mind about several things. Marco, he said as they lingered over coffee and hot chocolate for Lucia, I have a proposition for you, but I want you to feel completely free to say no. Marco looked up, wariness returning to his expression. I know the production company is looking for a permanent crew member to join the team after this film wraps. They need someone reliable who already knows their systems and procedures. I'd like to recommend you for the position. It would mean steady work, better hours, and health benefits. Marco's expression shifted from wariness to stunned surprise. Are you serious? Completely, Keanu affirmed. Your work has already impressed everyone. This would just ensure they don't lose you to another production. Elena reached over to squeeze her son's hand, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. And, Keanu continued, I happen to know of an apartment building not far from the studio. It's managed by a friend of mine. They have a 2-bedroom unit opening up next month. The rent is reasonable, and it's in a good school district for Lucia. Mr. Reeves, Marco began, his voice thick with emotion. That's incredibly generous, but we couldn't possibly. You can pay the regular rent, Keanu interrupted gently. No special treatment, but having a good landlord in this city is worth its weight in gold, believe me. Lucia, who had been following the conversation with interest, despite not understanding all of it, looked up at Keanu. Does this mean we won't have to share one room anymore? Papi could have his own room, and Abuela wouldn't have to sleep on the couch? The simple question, asked with a child's directness, brought home the reality of their current living situation more vividly than anything else could have. Marco looked at his daughter, then back at Keanu. The struggle was visible on his face, pride versus pragmatism, independence versus his family's needs. I would still be earning everything through my own work, he asked finally. Absolutely, Keanu confirmed. The job recommendation is based entirely on merit, and the apartment would be a normal tenant relationship. You pay rent, they provide housing. Nothing unusual. After a long moment, Marco nodded. Then, thank you. We accept your help. The relief and gratitude in Elena's eyes said everything that didn't need to be spoken aloud. As they finished their meal and prepared to leave, Keanu made arrangements to have his driver take the family home, promising to connect Marco with the right people at work the next day regarding the permanent position. Outside the restaurant, as they waited for the car, Lucia suddenly took Keanu's hand in her small one. Thank you for helping my papi, she said solemnly. He works really hard and gets really tired, but he never complains. He's a superhero too, just like you. Keanu knelt down to the child's level, unexpectedly moved by her words. Your father is a much bigger hero than I could ever be, he told her sincerely. Taking care of the people you love, working hard even when it's difficult, that's real courage. As he stood up, Keanu was surprised to feel moisture on his cheeks. Without any self-consciousness, he wiped away the tears that had formed as Lucia's innocent observation broke through his usual composure. Marco noticed and approached, concern in his expression. Are you all right, Mr. Reeves? Keanu nodded, offering a smile that was tinged with both sadness and hope. Sometimes, he said quietly, we're reminded of what really matters in this world. Your daughter just gave me one of those reminders. The car arrived, and as the family prepared to leave, Elena embraced Keanu warmly. God bless you, she whispered. You've brought hope back into our lives. Marco extended his hand, which Keanu shook firmly. I don't know how to thank you properly, Marco said. Live well, Keanu replied simply. Take care of your family, and maybe someday, when you encounter someone else in need, remember tonight and pass on whatever help you can offer. As the car pulled away, Keanu stood on the sidewalk watching until it disappeared from view. The encounter had affected him deeply, triggering memories of his own struggles and losses over the years. He thought about the fragility of life, the importance of human connection, and how sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change a family's trajectory. The next morning on set, Keanu spoke quietly with the production manager about Marco's permanent position, emphasizing the young man's work ethic and reliability without mentioning his personal circumstances. By the end of the day, the offer had been made and accepted. A month later, Keanu received a simple card in the mail. Inside was a drawing clearly made by a child's hand, a stick figure with long dark hair standing beside 3 smaller figures. Written beneath in careful block letters were the words, "Thank you for being a real-life hero. Love, Lucia, Papi, and Abuela." Keanu placed the drawing carefully on his desk, a reminder of the unexpected connections that give meaning to life's journey, and the profound impact that can come from following a simple instinct to help someone in need. Years later, while working on another film, Keanu would encounter Marco again, now a respected member of the production team, supervising his own crew. Lucia, now a teenager, was interning with the art department during her school break, her early artistic talent beginning to blossom into genuine skill. She wants to be a production designer, Marco told Keanu proudly during a brief, private conversation between takes. She's already planning for art school. "And your mother?" Keanu asked. "Much better. The apartment building turned out to have another unexpected benefit. There's a retired nurse living next door who's become a close friend. She helps manage Mom's arthritis treatments." As they spoke, Keanu noticed the changes in Marco, the confidence that had replaced desperate determination, the ease in his demeanor that came from security rather than constant worry. "You know," Marco said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said that night, about passing on help when we can. Last year, we had a new crew member who was living in his car. I recognized the signs because I'd been there myself not so long ago." Keanu listened, understanding where the story was heading. "I was able to help him find stable housing, recommend him for a better position when he was ready. It changed everything for him." Marco looked directly at Keanu. "I finally understood why you followed me that day. Sometimes people need someone to see them, really see them, when they're in trouble but too proud to ask for help." Keanu smiled, deeply moved by the knowledge that his small intervention had created ripples that extended beyond just one family. "Thank you for seeing me," Marco said simply. "Thank you for reminding me what matters," Keanu replied. In that moment of connection between two men whose lives had intersected by chance, there was a shared understanding of life's fragility, the importance of compassion, and the quiet heroism found not on movie screens, but in the everyday struggles and triumphs of ordinary people doing their best to care for one another in a sometimes difficult world.